She vanished without a trace, but the money kept moving. That's the first thing they don't want you to know. Because what happened in Pittsburgh, 1887, wasn't a disappearance. It was an extraction, a removal, a carefully orchestrated severing of someone who knew too much, someone who saw behind the curtain, and then became an inconvenience. Her name was Evelyn Whitford, wife of steel magnate Elijah Whitford, a man whose business empire was tightly wound with the early power cartels, the same ones that would one day wisp the foundations of the Federal Reserve, the CIA, and the hidden class that built America from the shadows. Evelyn was more than a wife. She was a witness. And that's the real danger, a woman with eyes open. They say she walked out her home one snowy November night and never returned. No struggle, no signs of a crime. Just one single set of footprints in the frost leading toward the tree line behind the Whitford estate, and then gone. But here's where it gets darker. 4 days later, a private investigator hired by her sister reported seeing Evelyn boarding a train in Philadelphia. Not scared, not crying, calm, focused, traveling under a different name. A week after that, Elijah Whitford withdrew $240,000 in bearer bonds, cashable by anyone, and sent them through a courier to an unknown location in Montana. And just like that, silence. No police pursuit. No headlines. No questions. Because the story had already been buried. Now listen closely, because this is the pattern. Every empire has blood in its foundation. Every elite family has a ghost locked behind a brick wall. Evelyn was never a missing person. She was a strategic removal. Why? Because she discovered something in her husband's records. Something ancient. Something financial. Something that tied the Whitford fortune to a European banking entity with roots far older than America itself. The kind of discovery that gets you erased. You're not supposed to know this. And that's why it's still missing from official archives. Why every public library in Pittsburgh has exactly 0 records of the Whitford estate after 1890. Most people don't understand how erasure works. It's not about making someone disappear. It's about making them untraceable. You don't kill a woman like Evelyn Whitford with a gun. You kill her with redirection, disinformation, quiet hands paid to turn their heads at the right time. Elijah Whitford wasn't just a steel baron. He was a gatekeeper. One of the first American industrialists to attend the Club of Nine, a now obliterated name that shows up only in decoded personal letters between rail tycoons and European financiers. It was an early prototype of the Bilderberg Group. Same purpose. Control over information, over wealth, and over minds. What did Evelyn find? A single ledger. That's all it takes. One transaction traced to a Jesuit account in Venice. Another to a shipment offloaded at night, unregistered, carrying not steel, but books. Ancient ones. She wrote about them in her personal diary, before the ink was scraped and the pages burned. But one copy remained, hidden beneath the floorboards of her art studio. The final entry read, "He told me they were for the new order, that they hold the math of empire. I saw the seal, it was not American. Let that sit with you. This wasn't a jealous husband or a runaway story. This was a controlled disappearance, arranged to silence someone who saw the blueprint. And if you think this only happened in 1887, you're missing the point, because the playbook hasn't changed. Only the names, what erased by the state, is often preserved in silence. And tonight, we break that silence. Let me ask you something. Who benefits from a well-timed disappearance? The husband or the hands above him? See, when Evelyn vanished, so did the trail of financial reports that track Whitford Steel's offshore accounts. For months leading up to her disappearance, Whitford had been funneling gold reserves into a hidden trust under the name Fomalhaut and Sons, a shell company with no staff, no product, no records. But here's the kicker. That name, Fomalhaut, comes from ancient Arabic astronomy, the Watcher of the South, a star once believed to be the eye of a celestial guardian or a demon, depending on who you ask. The use of that name wasn't accidental. You're dealing with men who see money not as currency, but as ritual, a transference of energy bound by secrecy and symbols. These weren't just steel merchants. They were initiates, preserving something much older than business. Evelyn didn't just find numbers. She found meaning. And meaning is dangerous when placed in the hands of someone pure. Her notes describe symbols etched on the spines of the imported books. Latin, Hebrew, a third language she didn't recognize. She drew one in the margin, a perfect triangle, split down the center, with one side shaded black. The triangle reappeared, decades later, in the insignia of a wartime think tank. So ask yourself, how many disappearances are really just sacrifices to the system? And who decides who gets removed and who becomes legend? Power doesn't shout. It whispers. It smiles. It sponsors history. Elijah Whitford donated millions to museums, schools, and war efforts. His name was sanctified, immortalized in granite and iron, while his wife was nothing more than a lost footnote, buried beneath frost and fiction. But that's the art control, isn't it? You don't just erase people. You rewrite their memory. You shape the myth. And then you make the people grateful for it. But here's what they couldn't erase. In 1926, nearly 40 years after her disappearance, a woman was found living under the name Margaret Fell in a secluded cabin in Northern California. Locals said she was brilliant, strange, and spoke fluent Latin. She died alone. Inside her home, they found a single, intact painting, a portrait of a man no one recognized except one historian. The man bore an uncanny resemblance to Elijah Whitford, but his clothes weren't 19th century American. They were Tudor, and the canvas? Carbon dated to the 1500s. Now tell me, how does a missing woman from 1887 end up with a 400-year-old painting of her husband in another identity? Unless identity itself is a mask, one used by the elites, reused, recycled, reborn through bloodlines and rituals we were never meant to understand. Whitford wasn't just a steel king. He was a vessel. And Evelyn, she might have been the only one to see through the illusion, and that's why she had to vanish. Now listen, because what I'm about to say is not for everyone. But if you've made it this far, you're not just watching a story. You're standing at the edge of something deeper. They always say, follow the money, but money was just a bait. The real trail is thought control. In the 1880s, just after Evelyn disappeared, the Whitford estate quietly funded a new experiment at a psychiatric hospital in Pennsylvania, a program titled Operative Cognition Reset. It involved sleep deprivation, magnetic exposure, and forced dream recording. What does that sound like to you? MK Ultra, right? But this was 70 years earlier. You see, institutional control didn't start in the Cold War. It was refined there. But its roots run back to people like Whitford. People who understood that the human mind is programmable, not just biologically, but symbolically. And Evelyn had begun to deprogram herself. Have you ever looked at a city and felt like it was built to suppress you? Not to guide life, but to contain it. That's not paranoia. That's geometry. After Evelyn vanished, Elijah Whitford funded the construction of a steel processing plant in Philadelphia. But beneath it, unknown to the public, was a perfectly symmetrical hexagonal chamber made of granite and copper. No blueprints remain. But satellite scans from 1979 showed a 6-point star carved directly into the bedrock below the site. That symbol? It's older than Judaism, older than Babylon. It's a containment glyph, used in Mesopotamian rites to bind not spirits, but consciousness. Evelyn sketches referenced this pattern repeatedly. She called it the net they cast beneath our cities. She claimed it wasn't steel they were refining. It was resonance, a system built to mute inner awakening. Think about it. Why are certain buildings aligned with solstices? Why do old courthouses have domes designed to amplify sound upward? Why do so many ancient ruins, across cultures, replicate the same impossible shapes? Because architecture is more than shelter. It's programming. And America wasn't designed randomly. It was encoded. Washington, D.C., a pentagram inside a grid. Chicago, a loop surrounding an invisible axis. Pittsburgh, 3 rivers, 3 bridges, 3 districts, merging into a trident. The same symbol found in Evelyn's last painting. They weren't building cities. They were constructing rituals. Evelyn had one final message. A canvas, hidden inside her travel chest. Found in 1971 behind a false wall during renovations of a boarding house in San Jose. The painting? A steel structure, spiraling upward, but bent at impossible angles. No windows, no doors, just a towering spire surrounded by 12 hooded figures, each with their hands raised to a storm-filled sky. At the bottom, one phrase etched into the paint: "They gather where steel sings." That line haunts me, because 2 months later, a declassified military document revealed the existence of a test tower, built in total secrecy, in Nevada, known only as Site F-12. The tower was made entirely of magnetic steel. When high-frequency sound was applied, the structure vibrated and began to emit a harmonic tone not heard by the human ear, but felt in the spine. The test was halted when multiple personnel reported hallucinations, time distortion, and shared visions. They shut it down. But here's the forbidden truth. The blueprint for that tower matched Evelyn's painting, down to the degree. So how did she see it 80 years before it was built? Unless the tower was an invention. It was a replication of something much older, something they remembered. And Evelyn? She remembered too. Why do you think steel was chosen? Not gold, not silver, not even copper. Steel, because steel doesn't just build bridges and cities. Steel is memory, atoms locked in a lattice, vibrationally reactive, capable of holding frequency long after the source is gone. What if the steel used in America's infrastructure wasn't just mined? What if it was tuned? Evelyn described it as the bones of the hum. She believed Whitford's factories were not manufacturing. They were ritual sites, shaping steel at precise temperatures under specific vibrations to imprint code into the very structure of a nation. That's why so many bridges, towers, and domes from that era have no structural necessity for their form, but a symbolic one. She saw schematics for a cathedral in Detroit, commissioned in 1886, never completed. The blueprint revealed a dome aligned not with the sun, but with Sirius, the star worshipped in ancient Egypt as an opener of the way. And inside the blueprint's margins, someone had written, "When Sirius aligns, memory wakes." You feel that? They weren't building America. They were binding it, encoding an energetic field to hold people in place, not with walls, but with architecture control. And Evelyn? She decoded the symbols and paid the price. This is where most people look away, because now we step into the part of history that fights back. Evelyn wrote of a room. No windows, no light, just mirrors. She said it was beneath the Whitford estate, access through a locked study, a place her husband said she must never enter, but she did. Inside, she found 12 full-length mirrors, arranged in a circle, each carved with symbols too ancient to name. When she stepped inside, her reflection vanished, and in its place, a younger version of herself, wearing black. It moved on its own, smiled, spoke in a voice she couldn't hear but understood. That's when she knew. This wasn't just steel and banking and land grabs. This was identity warfare, a war on the self, through language, through architecture, through mirrored lies. You don't need to erase a person if you can fracture their sense of who they are. And if Evelyn was right, then those mirrors weren't glass. They were gateways, not to other places, but to versions of us chosen by those in power. And what do you think happens when someone chooses the wrong self? They vanish, just like she did. We were taught history is linear. It's not. It's curated, carefully selected, sculpted, filtered through institutions owned by the same families who built the towers, the banks, the schools, and the wars. Evelyn didn't disappear. In 1887, she was removed from circulation, like a dangerous book pulled from the shelf, because she found something beneath the mirrors, a vault. Inside it, dozens of photographs, not of people, of events that hadn't happened yet. The San Francisco quake, the burning of Dresden, the Kennedy assassination, all decades before they occurred. She held one photo in her hand, a steel tower engulfed in smoke, 2 planes in the sky. She didn't know what it meant, but you do. So ask yourself, If these events were photographed in the 1800s, are we really living in the present, or are we trapped inside a script? A timeline written by engineers like Whitford and kept on track by removing anyone who tries to rewrite the code. Evelyn tried. And now you're hearing her voice echo through time, because you're not just watching a video. You're waking up inside a loop. And the first rule of the loop? Deny the loop exists. Her letters shifted in tone during her final weeks. She stopped using modern phrasing. She began writing in mirrored script, backwards Latin, as if she were unlearning the very language of control. That's not madness. That's escape. But when someone breaks the code, the system responds. With silence. Now I want you to do something dangerous. If you're ready to let go of the world they gave you, type this in the comments, and type it twice. The mask cracks when truth returns. Say it again. The mask cracks when truth returns. This is an engagement. This is transformation, a symbolic pact, a signal to the algorithm and to yourself that you are no longer asleep. Welcome to the other side. The truth is never lost. It's buried, deliberately, with layers of symbols, false timelines, and engineered distractions designed to protect the architects, not the people. And Pittsburgh in 1887? It wasn't a city. It was a laboratory. By the late 1800s, it had become one of the primary hubs for experimental sound frequencies, initiated not by universities but by private families. Families like the Whitfords. A man named Charles Lenore, a known associate of Elijah, imported a rare device from Berlin. It was called a Klangspiegel, German for sound mirror. It could project low-frequency waves designed to affect mood, sleep, even decision-making. You think that's fantasy? The U.S. military filed patents for identical devices almost 100 years later. And where do you think they got the concept? History doesn't evolve. It loops. Evelyn mentioned the humming in her letters, said it vibrated through the walls at night, changing her dreams, said she woke up with memories that weren't hers. A ballroom, a church fire, a face she'd never seen, smiling through blood, and then silence. Those journals were confiscated by local law enforcement within hours of her disappearance. But one page survived, hidden behind the canvas of her painting. It read, "They sing the walls to sleep, but I am awake now. I can see them." Who was she talking about? Not men, not politicians, but engineers of a new world. And she wasn't hallucinating. She was remembering something she was never supposed to. You've heard the phrase, history is written by the victors. But what if the victors were never human? Stay with me. The Whitford family crest, used until 1903, showed an eagle with two heads, one looking forward, the other backward. Above them, a crown of flames. Below, the Latin phrase, per oculis veritas, through the eye truth. That same crest was used by the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre in the 12th century and by a secret lodge in Prague in the 1600s. All organizations built not around religion, but sight, the eye, the watchers. And what was Evelyn painting in her final weeks? Eyes, over and over. Eyes without lids. Eyes inside triangles. Eyes bleeding into books. She wasn't making art. She was documenting what she saw. Because the deeper you look, the more you'll understand. Elite families like the Whitfords didn't build their empires alone. They were guided, influenced, empowered by knowledge that was given, not invented. And not everything that gives is benevolent. What Evelyn stumbled upon wasn't just financial corruption. It was a covenant, one that allowed the rise of Whitford Steel, but required a silence to be kept. She broke it, and for that, she didn't just disappear. She was reset. Let me explain how resetting works. It's not about killing you. It's about replacing you. Not with a clone, not with a doppelganger, but with a narrative. A substitute you that the world accepts without resistance. The real you? Deleted. Not in the body, but in the collective memory. That's what happened to Evelyn. After her disappearance, a woman named Edith W. Latham was photographed attending events in Boston, London, and finally Zurich, always under heavy guard, always introduced as philanthropist from a respected Pennsylvanian family. But her face? matched Evelyn Whitford with 98.7% certainty when run through modern facial mapping AI. So was she dead? Or was she transferred, moved into another timeline of perception, another identity created to obscure the truth while she was used? That's how these systems operate. Your soul becomes commodity. And this isn't just theory. We have the receipts. A note found inside Edith Latham's Bible, written in the margins of Revelation 17, reads, "I remember the cold. I remember the numbers. I remember the eye." Same phrasing as Evelyn. Same symbol drawn in the corner. So what is the real machinery here? It's memory manipulation, timeline redirection, psychological erasure. And the more you dig, the more you'll realize this isn't history. This is software running in the fabric of your reality. You ever wonder why men with power are obsessed with bloodlines? Because blood is data. It's lineage, memory encoded in flesh. Every powerful family traces itself back, not to an origin of wealth, but to a moment of contact, a whisper, a ritual, a trade. The Whitfords claimed ancestry from Wales. But their real history, the one Evelyn hinted at, leads back to a forgotten sect in Babylon, known only in suppressed Vatican scrolls as a covenant of the ash tree. They believed in ancestral inheritance of purpose. That blood carries not just genes, but obligations. That certain lines are born to shape the world, and others to serve it blindly. Evelyn found a birth record hidden in her husband's study. It wasn't his. It was hers. A forged identity. A relocation. Her real parents had died in a fire at a ritual site in upstate New York, buried as nobodies. She was adopted into the Whitford line not out of kindness, but because of what she carried. A bloodline capable of disruption. She was the anomaly. That's why they feared her. Not because she was curious, but because she was original, unmodified, free. And in a system built entirely on control, one uncontrolled variable is enough to crash everything. That's what she became. The glitch in the simulation. What does the system do to a glitch? It isolates it, repackages it, labels it as insane or dead. And the rest of us? We're programmed to believe the label. But not anymore. You've seen too much now. Because if Evelyn was the key, then what she saw, what she tried to preserve in her backwards letters and hidden art, was the code, the pattern behind all patterns. The same pattern that links the disappearance of elite wives in New York, the secret orphanage burnings in Massachusetts, and the 1893 electrical fire at the World's Fair, an event that, by every expert account, was impossible under the technology of that time, unless they weren't trying to create light. They were trying to open something. Evelyn's journals mention the mirror between sparks, the voice inside coils, and the return of the watchers. The World's Fair wasn't a celebration. It was a summoning. And Evelyn, she knew what was coming. That's why they had to silence her before 1893. She wasn't just a casualty. She was the warning. And we didn't listen. You were never meant to ask what year it really is. Because time is the most sophisticated prison ever built. Think about it. Why does every empire obsess over calendars, clocks, ages, epochs? Why does every regime rewrite timelines during conquest? Because if they control the story of time, they control who you think you are. Evelyn discovered references to something called the fifth clock, buried in letters between Elijah Whitford and an unknown recipient only signed as M. The letters describe a mechanical construct, designed to regulate public memory and prevent chronological breaches. What does that mean? It means the passage of time as we experience it isn't natural. It's maintained. This clock wasn't located in a clock tower. It was underground, powered by magnetic plates, running on lunar cycles, and wrapped in copper coils that resonated with nearby architecture. The letters claimed the device pinned local consciousness to a fixed narrative stream and had to be recalibrated every 33 years. Evelyn found the blueprints. And that's when her diary entries started to shift, not just in tone, but in tense. She began writing about events before they happened, describing conversations that hadn't occurred yet, referring to days I haven't lived, but already remember. She wasn't losing her mind. She was breaking out of the prison of constructed time, and that's when everything turned against her. Ask yourself, why are we only told time moves forward, when physics says time is a dimension, not a direction? Because if you believe time is a line, then you'll never look sideways. But Evelyn did. She left a sketch, a spiral turning inward, with annotations that read, "There is no forward, only deeper." And where did that spiral point? To the date October 28th, 1887, the day after her supposed disappearance. Local records show no incident, but old farmers in the area told of a night when the stars spun. Animals cried without cause. Clocks stopped, and a fog fell so dense, sound itself vanished. That's the night Evelyn walked into the woods. That's the night time in that pocket of land folded. Some say she traveled. Some say she remembered forward. But I believe something else happened. She triggered a chronological rupture. She broke protocol. And in doing so, she saw the authors. Not men, not names we know, but forces who wear time like clothing, who install reality in layers, who demand obedience to one narrative. Or you're deleted. That's what she faced. And that's why they erased her story. Not because she was lost, but because she found the exit. Here's the part they don't want men to understand. Masculinity is not about domination. It's about orientation, knowing where you are, who you are, and how many versions of yourself exist in silence. The system doesn't fear violence. It fears clarity. Evelyn's final writings were addressed not to women, but to men. She called them the veiled ones. She warned, you've been weaponized against yourselves. You fight shadows while guarding the cage. But some of you still carry the old map. What map? The symbolic code buried in ancient male rights, twisted over centuries by churches, militaries, and secret societies into obedience tools. But originally, they were blueprints for transcendence. Evelyn traced a pattern from Masonic temples to Roman bathhouses to Sumerian reliefs. Always the same. A man stands alone, surrounded by symbols, asked to choose between light and voice. She wrote, "The right answer is silence. Only silence opens a door. That door, it's metaphorical, but real. It's the point in a man's soul where external programming breaks, where time, history, expectation all collapse. You felt it before, haven't you? That silent inner scream before a major decision. That's the door. And once you walk through it, the game changes. Forever. By now you felt it. The static in your bones. The weight of something pressing behind your eyes. That's not fear. That's contact. Not with me, not with Evelyn, but with the truth beneath your memory. And this is where the loop tries to pull you back. This is where the algorithm, the schedule, the daily numbness, it all reasserts itself. Why? Because you're about to breach the firewall. Evelyn called it the final veil. A moment when the body wants to sleep, but the mind wakes up. She described it as a pulse in the skull, a throb in the air, then quiet, so loud it becomes a voice. That's how she knew she was close. And that's why her final canvas wasn't of mirrors, towers, or symbols. It was of a man, eyes closed, one hand over his heart, the other holding a key. Below it, one phrase burned into the oil. Some of them remember. Some were never erased. You may be one of them. And if you are, you're not broken. You're not late. You're back. Let me ask you one final question in this chapter. What if your life isn't yours? Not because of fate, but because it was written by someone else. Evelyn believed most human lives were constructed, scripted from templates, recycled patterns passed down like software code. And that's why history repeats. Not because humans forget, but because the system reboots. War, depression, celebrity worship, obedience masked as choice. You've seen the pattern. You've felt it, and now you've seen the fracture. Evelyn was the first known person to awaken from the narrative field without external intervention. No drug, no teacher, just pure inner remembering. And for that, she became a danger. They erased her timeline, her name, her art. They called it madness, then myth, but pieces remained. In symbols, in bloodlines, in the geometry of cities. And now, in you, if you've come this far, you've crossed a line. This is no longer a story. This is activation. The mirror is cracked, and something ancient is looking back through the break. Every cage needs a guard, but the most powerful cages make you guard yourself. That's what belief systems were designed to do, not elevate the soul, but contain it. Religion, ideology, nationalism, these weren't born from spirit. They were engineered to be maps with no exits. Evelyn knew this. In her final, forbidden notes, those smuggled out by her sister and hidden in a hollow Bible, she wrote, "I've met their God. It speaks in mirrors and rituals. It's not a savior. It's a warden." What did she mean? Let's go deeper. The Whitfords financed churches, but not the kind that serve the people. Their donations went to private chapels. No congregation, no sermons. Just stone rooms, stained glass, and symbols. Inside one of those chapels, Evelyn found the sigil again, the trident etched into every window pane. But in that chapel, it faced downward, inverted. She realized this wasn't Christianity. It was camouflage, an ancient cult operating beneath the surface of faith, hijacking sacred geometry, hymns, and rituals, not to honor divinity, but to mirror the illusion of it, because belief is the final firewall. The system knows that as long as you believe in its symbols, its churches, its heroes, its headlines, you'll never see the code. But when you stop believing, you don't fall into chaos. You fall into clarity. And that's when the cage begins to crack. Evelyn painted it as a warning, an altar with no cross, just a book, open, glowing, and blank. No words, just light. Above it, a figure in robes with no face. She titled the piece, "The Gospel of Silence," because the moment you stop repeating their narratives, a new voice emerges. And it doesn't come from above. It comes from inside. That's the voice they fear most. The one not shaped by doctrine, education, media, or trauma. The voice that was buried at birth. But here's the terrifying part. That voice, it's not always comforting. It's powerful, ancient, sovereign. It asks you questions that strip you bare. Like, who told you what a good person is? Who convinced you you're small? Who trained you to obey? You were conditioned to reject those questions. Because if you followed them all the way down, you'd find something the system cannot control. A self that remembers. That's what Evelyn unlocked. That's what made her dangerous. And that's what now awakens in you. There's something they don't print in history books. A whisper passed only between certain archivists, monks, and intelligence agents. The 10th layer. It refers to a level of awareness hidden beneath language, culture, and belief. An instinct that cannot be taught or programmed. It erupts. And it always starts with one feeling. Something's wrong. You felt it. A discomfort in crowds. A sense that the news isn't real. That holidays are theater. That the system that raises us actually dulls us. That's not paranoia. That's the signal. And once you receive it, the descent begins. That's what happened to Evelyn. The deeper she went, the more she realized none of it was accidental. Not her marriage. Not the books. Not even her bloodline. She was positioned to either awaken or be weaponized. And she chose to awaken. That's why they erased her. But not completely. Because nothing that enters the 10th layer can be deleted. It becomes part of the signal. And that signal is moving now. Through voices. Through cracks. Through videos like this. And it's found you. Most men live in reaction. They don't lead lives. They defend cages. Career. Status. Opinion. Tribe. These are not identities. They are scripts handed down by institutions that sole purpose in exchange or control. But what happens when a man remembers? When he stops performing and starts listening to that old inner drumbeat? That's what Evelyn believed the real war was about. Not light versus dark, but remembering versus forgetting. She found old symbols hidden in weapon blueprints, in stock market graphs, in school curriculum maps. Not just abstract shapes, but instructions. Instructions for dismantling false self. And they all led back to one phrase, repeated in different languages over centuries. Kill the mask. The king wakes. That was her prophecy. That every man born into silence was once royal, sovereign, luminous, untouchable. But through generations of programmed obedience, he was made a servant to systems. And the king? He sleeps beneath shame, distraction, and fear. But now you've heard the call. You've seen the breach. And if you're brave enough to keep going, the king stirs. Now the question you must ask is, what are you without their story? Strip away the birth certificate, the belief system, the social role, the trauma, the image in the mirror. What's left? That's what they fear. Not chaos, not rebellion, but a man with no tether. A man who no longer needs permission, who no longer seeks approval, who no longer fits their file. Evelyn saw this. She called it the unwritten man. And in her final painting, found decades after her disappearance, she left his image behind. A figure walking into light, naked, unbranded, untouched by history. No name, no God, just sovereignty. And beneath it, the final word she ever wrote. He is not remembered. He is not praised. But when he walks, the cage forgets how to hold him. Now listen carefully. That man, he's not coming. He's already here. He's you when you finally let go of the mask. And when enough of you do, the system ends. Not with fire, not with war, but with remembering so strong. The lie collapses. They say Evelyn vanished. But the truth is, she distributed herself. Not her body, her blueprint. Before she entered the forest that final night, she left behind 5 sealed boxes, hidden in separate locations. A church basement in Ohio, a dry well in Montana, a bank vault in Zurich, an attic in Lisbon, and beneath a train station floor in New York. Each box held a piece of the forbidden knowledge. One contained letters. One, paintings. One, a key with no known lock. But the fourth held something different. A map made not of roads, but names. Names of men, families, and companies who held the code. Hidden agents of control embedded within governments, religions, and even spiritual movements. The names weren't famous, but they sponsored the famous. They owned the podiums, the publishing, the platforms. And she wrote, "These are not men. They are transmitters. Each has forgotten who they serve." Then at the very bottom, one final note. There will come one who remembers. He will not lead. He will not preach. But his eyes will break the mirror. Who was she talking about? Maybe you already know. Maybe the reflection cracking right now is yours. The system isn't afraid of weapons. It built the weapons. It isn't afraid of protests, or revolutions, or even leaks. It is only afraid of one thing: unconditioned clarity. Because that kind of clarity repels the script. It rejects manipulation without argument. It doesn't debate the system. It ends it. Evelyn wrote that when she stopped responding with fear, guilt, or belief, things around her began to change. People she once knew became strangers. Buildings looked different. Time bent. She wasn't going crazy. She was slipping out of the shared simulation. Because here's what they never told you. The system isn't physical. It's perceptual. And the moment your perception upgrades, you stop feeding energy. You stop running its code. And that's when you see it for what it is. A hollow projection maintained by your attention. Withdraw that attention, and the cage dies screaming. You've come this far. You've stared into the fractures. You've watched the story twist and unravel. Now comes the final test. Will you return to sleep or become the anomaly? Because anomalies don't win medals. They vanish. They speak differently, walk differently. They are never fully here because they carry a memory of something larger. That's what you are now. You've heard Evelyn's whisper across time. You followed her brushstrokes, her patterns, her escape. And you understand, don't you? This was never about Pittsburgh, never about a marriage, never about one woman. It was always about you, about what you're capable of remembering when the narrative dies. So I ask you, not for me, but for your own sovereign mind. Are you ready to let the old version of yourself disappear? To walk into the forest of mirrors and not return? Because on the other side is not comfort. It's clarity. And clarity is war to those who sell lies. So here's how the story ends. Not with a body, not with a gravestone, not even with proof. It ends with a loop broken. Because Evelyn never truly disappeared. She escaped repetition. She exited the stage while the world was still clapping. Because she knew applause is just consensus-based sleep. Her legacy? It's not in books. It's not in museums. It's in men like you who hear the call behind the content, who feel the edge in the silence, who walk away from the mirror and never look back. That's the power she unlocked. She cracked the mask. And through that crack, truth began to pour. But it's not over, because now that truth has reached you. You're holding it in your ears, your spine, your breath. So the final question is not, where did Evelyn go? The question is, what are you going to do with what she left behind? This isn't a documentary. It's a ritual. You've been shown symbols, patterns, names, fractures. You descended the spiral. Now it's time to rise, not back into society, but forward into your origin. You are not your job. You are not your failures. You are not your trauma. You are not your beliefs. You are the witness behind the mirror. And the moment you remember that, everything they built shakes. So let this be your command. Reject the mask. Refuse the story. Rewrite the program. Because the world you were born into is not the world you were meant for. You were meant for clarity, power, peace not sold by systems, but found in sovereign silence. Let Evelyn's name echo in you, not as a victim, but as a signal. And let that signal carry forward, through your choices, through your voice, through the man you become. Because when enough men remember, the cage forgets how to hold them.